Welcome to the Bike Life Podcast by Warmshowers Foundation, where we will be sharing knowledge, experience, tools, and stories of touring cyclists and hosts from around the world. I'm Tara Lee, the woman behind the scenes at Warmshowers Foundation, the leading platform for cyclists looking for hosts and to connect with a passionate international community. Find out more by visiting us at Warmshowers.org. Now, on to the show. Attracting attention, racing, camping, cycling with two little girls, being exposed to the good and the not so good. Today's guest has experienced it all. Melissa Pritchard, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And where shall we start today?
Well, I think, Taverly, I listened to your podcast, and I was listening to the episode of Murdoch, who is one of your, he's a high hit Warm Showers host on the California coast. And there was a call you did, Melissa, if you're listening here, we'd love to have you on this show, because he was going through how he became a Warm Shower host. So I am that Melissa from that show.
Isn't that so amazing? I'm going to link that show in the comments, but that to me is just like so many good feelings to see us come full circle to where we are. So tell us a little bit about kind of the beginning of your journey, because you've experienced so much, and I feel like we could talk for hours. Alas, we cannot. But starting, where do you think is a good place for us to get into it past that? I mean, I want to hear. I guess I want to hear where you started cycling, like before you were traveling with kids, like before that part progressed.
Okay. So I'm one of 5 kids in my family. So I credit my energy to having multiple siblings, growing up in the outdoors, literally. I don't ever have any memories from inside. Cycled a lot when I was young, but we were 5. So my parents, and we never did cycle trips, but I loved my bike and I always used my bike. However, it wasn't until I turned 30, and it was kind of like my birthday present to myself. I was living in Barcelona. I've lived abroad since I've been about 21 years old. And I broke up with my boyfriend, who told me, oh, you're just so distracted, you should never road cycle. So what did I do? I went out and bought a bike on my 30th birthday, and I started cycling. And people must think of Barcelona for the really good parties, for the day, for the clubs, the after hours. Here I was getting up at ungodly hours, like 6 o'clock in the morning, when everybody was stumbling home from the bars, and I was meeting up with a cycling club, and it became like a religion. We went out every Saturday, then every Sunday, and they introduced me to road cycling, and road cycling in Spain is phenomenal. So I was hooked, but then I didn't want it. Then I got curious, because I love to travel too. And I had seen people with these bags and look fully loaded. And I thought, I love to travel. I love to ride my bike. Why don't I give bike touring a try? So my first trip actually was back in the Pacific Northwest. I didn't use Warm Showers on that trip. I have to admit, I didn't even camp before on my own with that trip. And I set off, and my younger brothers made a bet, like, is she actually going to be able to do the Pacific Northwest tour? It's one of the bike routes on Adventure or American Cycling route. I hadn't opened my tent, which was purchased in Spain. I hadn't even opened my sleeping mat or my sleeping bag, but I was determined. And I had actually literally called up a bike store in Eugene, Oregon, and said, hey, I want this bike, a Surly, right? Everybody gets a Surly. I wanted the cross check. And I hopped on it, tried it at the store. And like the next day, I was on the bus to go up to Portland and to start my trip. And I didn't even change out the saddle, which everybody knows Surly puts on like the world's worst saddle on their bike, knowing that everybody's going to change out to a Brooks. That's another story. But that's where I started out. And I did make it home on that trip. Although I got to tell you, that first night when I arrived at my campsite, I went to dinner. I treated myself to a restaurant that night. And I woke up in the middle of the night, completely famished and freezing cold, and got out every single item of clothing that I had packed in my bag and put it on. And the reason I was so hungry was because I was used to road cycling. So I think that first day I cycled about 150 kilometers thinking, oh, this is what I know. This is what you do. And little by little, I learned from experience.
Mm.
That's where it all started.
Wow, what a great trip, the first one. So one of your brothers lost the bet, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so that must have been a really eye-opening experience, like your first ride. Obviously, you're still cycling now, so there was a lot of joy in the resiliency that you built, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I was hooked at that point, and I don't know where it exactly was that I learned about warm showers, because I don't think I did warm shower host then. It was a little bit later, probably when I was researching for their trips, that I learned about warm showers. But then after that, of course, I did another short trip. I did a trip in Spain to see, hey, can I do this in Spain? Okay. Then as a teacher, I have the luxury of having a lot of holidays. So I planned my next bike tour. I was like, okay, can I do this in a foreign country that I don't know? Can I build my bike coming out of a box? So I kind of gave myself little challenges along the way. And so my next trip was Thailand, which is a pretty easy country to do on a bike just because there's food and cheap lodging everywhere and people speak English. So little by little, I kind of pushed myself out of my comfort zone, until I kind of get this 5 year itch in my life. I
Hmm.
don't know, we might have to break this habit just now that I have a
Hmm.
family, but 5 years, this was my second 5 year stint in Spain, and I'd already done, bike big gran fondos, a lot of bike racing, a lot of triathlons, ultra triathlons, ultra marathons, and I was itching for change. Just in general, my life. I was living in the best place that existed in the world, and I thought I want to change something. What do I want to do? I applied for a couple jobs back in Oregon, and then I thought, well, why don't I take some time off to travel around the world? And that was in 2013. And there was kind of like this big economic crisis in 2013. So everybody was holding on to their job. But if you teach and you are willing to go anywhere in the world, like a lot of international teachers do, then there's kind of no fear of finding a job later because there's always a need for teachers around the world. And so I was using that, knowing that I could probably get a job if I took a sabbatical and followed this dream or this challenge to cycle around the world on my own. And so I called it the Long Way Home, spelling long wrong on purpose, using two O's. Not very many people could figure it out, right? Like the long way home, but it was for the bike wheels. And I challenged myself to cycle from Barcelona to Oregon, taking the long way, so heading east. And that is when I started using my warm showers on that trip.
Mm. So you took the sabbatical, and so how
Yes.
long? And did you get a job along the way, and how long was that trip?
Yeah. So that trip, I think looking back in hindsight, I would have maybe wanted to organize it a bit differently because I wanted to schedule it to be on my birthday when I arrived home. And I started in the summer because my years are always like, compared to other maybe non-teachers, my years go from September to September for the teaching year, the academic year. So I started in the summer in June, and I went all the way through the next summer up to my birthday in October. And the plan was to arrive in Oregon on my birthday. So looking back, I was like, man, why didn't I take 3 or 4 years? That trip was so much fun. But
Yeah.
I also am someone who likes to pedal. So I do bigger days compared to other people. And I was really sad about actually leaving my job and thought I would miss teaching. So I invented this name for myself called The Teacher on Two Wheels. I created a website. I had everything documented with a blog with activities for teachers. And I visited schools along the way and talked to kids a little bit about what I was doing. Not so much to be like this inspirational speaker, but to be, I wasn't the best student necessarily growing up. I struggled a lot in school, but to kind of give that message to kids, like one of the reasons you're here is to develop passions and interests and be inquisitive and be curious and find out things, investigate. And so that's what I was doing because this was one of my passions was the cycle. And I wanted to see if I could cycle around the world. On my own. So I visited something like 26 different schools, I think, in
Hmm.
maybe 30 different countries. The problem was international schools always tend to be in big cities, and cyclists want to avoid big cities. So that was really like an oxymoron there with my trip. But I managed to hit, oh my gosh, every big city you can possibly imagine: Hong Kong, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh, these huge cities that you think, oh, what are you doing here? And I was in the midst of them. but it was a phenomenal trip that just really, changed who I was. My parents, thought they were never going to survive the trip because what is their daughter doing cycling around the world on her own? And yeah, it was a really wonderful experience. Really wonderful experience.
I can't even imagine how many lives you changed along the way with the students that you met and the teachers too. I'm sure that if you think of the ripples that you left, not just with students, but with the teachers too, the ripples that you left along the way are forever out there.
Right. And that actually goes for like the warm shower community as well. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed, you know, being taken in. I got taken by so many people. You can't even imagine. I thought I was going to camp so much. And people would see a solo female cyclist and they like wouldn't have anything of it. It was almost like I had to take one of those hotel signs that's like, I want my privacy, please, and put it on my bike because everybody was always so curious. And that's really interesting too, because in undeveloped countries, people couldn't understand what I was doing by myself. They would ask me, they would hold up one finger, like one. I was like, yeah, it's just me. You don't see anybody else here right next to me. And I think they were wondering, like, what's you, a woman who should be married, who should have kids doing? Because then they would make the, are you married symbol? Do you have a baby? I'm like, no, 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 no. But they would just go with the flow. And when I would be in more developed countries, it was like, what are you doing? And who are you doing this for? Like, is there a charity that you're raising money for? And and I think that's great. A lot of people do it for really great causes for other people. But I said, I think it's really challenging for some people to have a dream and to actually follow it. And like you said, how does that impact other people, right? Because just in the daily conversations that you have with someone when you stop at a, national park to see that, or have a coffee at their little cafe, or ask to use a toilet, it's like you said, it's that ripple effect that's just, and I've got these flash memories. If I go back down memory lane with the Loong Way Home, wow, I can really get on a good ride with just the memories from that trip.
Did anyone reach out to you along the way or find you along the way that you afterwards or even currently found out that they embarked on cycling because they saw what you were doing?
Yeah, so I stayed with a couple of warm showers hosts who became warm shower hosts in New Zealand, and that was their way to learn and research before they actually set off. I thought that was actually really smart, and they had a guest book, and you signed the guest book and you left a tip, right, for what's one thing that you would definitely don't need to take or what you would leave behind next time, and you would share your expertise there. In that interview you did with Murdoch, he was a forest fighter, and he had never done hosting before, and he just found me on the road, and I must have looked just that exhausted going up this major steep climb out of water. And when he invited me to his house to stay the night, and not even as a host. And when I told him, oh yeah, there's this network out there. And so he kept on taking in so many people. And here he was a sporty, outdoorsy man, but now he has a bike and he does his own bike tours. And even when he does his own bike tours, I think he still leaves his house open for warm shower hosts. I mean, that's just how big of a heart he has. So yeah, and definitely other people that have followed me and said, I've used your blog as inspiration. I've actually met people whose blog I read online on the road and said, no way, I read your blog or this or that or the other. So that's what, the ripple effect, but also it's like how many degrees of separation are there when you start to bike travel?
Right. As we were talking about before we were recording, although our community is large, it's actually small.
Yeah.
It's actually small. This is all so amazing. I know that you said you have a family now. So tell us about how did you meet your husband and how did that unfold?
So let's see. After that bike trip, I always explain this to people because although I rode my bike alone, I never felt lonely. And I think one of the hardest parts, because everybody asks you, what's the hardest part of, cycling? The hardest part for me was actually coming back and trying to fit into having more of a normal life after my trip and figuring out what that was. I remember going back into teaching. So I'd wanted to go to a different country when I came back, and I found a job in Switzerland because that's a great place place to cycle and to be outdoors and to learn a new language. So I went to the French speaking part of Switzerland. And I just remember standing in front of my class thinking, what am I doing as a teacher? What am I doing in front of all these really like privileged kids when I've seen kids that have been walking 5 kilometers to school? I've seen kids in, Myanmar who were having class in the dark on a weekend because they were that excited and motivated to learn. It just changed the way that I saw teaching and how I delivered teaching and just how I connected to kids. And so that first year was kind of like adapting to the real life again. And that second year, I had spent so much time working and I didn't have a family. I wasn't dating anybody. I had a hard time. I didn't even care about making friends. I had my bike and I'd just get out there and ride whenever I needed to. That was my company. I learned how to be with me, myself, and I on my world tour. So I thought, I'm up for a next challenge. What is it? And one of the people that followed my trip, who's also Warm Showers host. And then I hosted them because they came from Spain as well. And they were slowly behind me on their trip. When they came to the United States, I hosted them. And they told me about this really crazy race that goes across Europe called the Transcontinental Race. And it's a bikepacking race. And you have to be self-supported and you have to make it through these 4 checkpoints. So I was like, aha, that's my next challenge. I'm always up for a good challenge, whatever it is. And so I signed up for this race because that was going to be the way that I didn't stay at work and become a workaholic. Everybody else went home to a family, kids. I had my bike, and that's what I was going to do. And so I trained and I trained and I trained. And while I was training for that race, I was still kind of giving some talks about my trip and what I did at like local bike cooperatives and different bike festivals, traveling festivals. And that's where I met my husband. He came and listened to me to hear about my trip, but also to say, hey, I'm in that race too. And he was like this hardcore cyclist who had tried to break the Guinness Book of World Record and cycle around the world the fastest. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not fast. I'm just like, I can endure. And we went out for one ride. And I remember thinking, oh, I can't train with this guy here. He tried to push me on my bike and he goes so fast and all he cares about is speed and all the technicalities. And he tried to show me the art and the science of a bike fit. And I thought this is never going to work, but magic played its course. And we ended up getting together, with all the training that we were doing. We did the race. He probably could have won the race. He got 3rd place in the race. I won it for the women. And in our celebration, out came our first child. So we do things kind of the non-conventional way. Mm-hmm. So this is how we had our first child, who was basically born out of biking and on a bike, and was on a bike probably for the first time in the back of a bike trailer when she was 5 weeks old. Wow. We had one of those Thule, like single bike trailers, kind of like the Burley trailer, but we could wedge and really harness in a car seat. And we had a really open-minded pediatrician that said, it'd be great if you could get her in like a secure car seat. So we figured out how to get a car seat in the back of a bike. And she was doing, Passo Giao in Italy at 2 months. But I feel like once you do a bike tour, right, and you realize how little you need to be happy and to live, you can do anything. And that's kind of what it showed me. So yeah, could I take on that race and cycle across Europe, 3,500 kilometers in 9 days? Sure, why not? And that was probably the best preparation along with bike touring for becoming a parent, right? I mean, a lot of similarities, a lot of similes that you could make between those two, having kids and bike touring. So yeah, and now we bike as a family.
I'm awed and wowed. It doesn't happen very often, but I'm almost speechless. I want you to tell us how you transitioned into the family life. Did you stay settled in one place as a family, or did you keep touring? Were you still teaching? How did that transition go?
Yeah, and that was always like a work, in progress. We were always talking about it and thinking about it as a family and as a couple, because my husband Jonas is really into traveling, and I thought it wasn't going to work at first because I thought he was all about the competition. But we had spent so much of our time cycling solo that we actually really appreciated cycling together and sharing that passion with somebody else and transmitting that to our daughters. So We had a dream that started out of discussion that we wanted to cycle from Alaska to Ushuaia, and we just weren't sure about the timing. When do we want to do this? We were always taking little trips with our first daughter, and then we thought, well, maybe it's better to wait till she's older. So we thought, okay, we've both got good jobs, now's the time to have baby number two. Let's just get this, one after the other. If I can bike to her, if I can ultra cycle, I can have two in diapers. We can have two in diapers and do this. And I was an older mom with all the experience I had prior to having kids. So kind of needed to be done fast if we wanted to have a family. And so we had baby number two, Eileen, after Chloe, baby number one, 17 months after. So that's a little bit insane too. But hey, it's like getting pregnant when you've got an 8-month-old. You think, how on earth? But how on earth did I do the other things? Or did we do those other things? So we had baby number two and thought we'll just put our world trip on hold until they're a little bit older to appreciate it and maybe not have to do diapers along the way. And then life takes a turn, right? Just like that road that you didn't expect to go uphill or downhill. And the school I was working at in Switzerland closed down while I was pregnant, actually, with my second. And it was actually like, I look back now and I think, wow, I was really lucky because 5 months after our second was born, COVID hit. And I thought, would I want to be in a classroom or would I want to be teaching online, nursing and having a little toddler by my feet, right? So I had the opportunity to stay at home and be with our girls. My husband was working. But then what happened? Those magic 5 years of itchy feet. So that's when we started thinking, okay, should we go off on our adventure? Should we travel? What should we do? But I'd been out of the classroom enough and had done a course in that time as well. I thought, oh, I'd love to get back in the classroom, but why don't we choose another spot to try it out. And let's look for a school where I can grow professionally. And that's how we landed in Cambodia, where we thought there were lots of French speakers too, because it was an old French colony. And we landed in Cambodia and we're there and soon realized that, wow, probably not the best. We thought, oh, we can cycle. I've cycled in Southeast Asia, but we were like a circus attraction there. It was not safe necessarily to be cycling there as a family. A lot of my colleagues were like, oh my gosh, I see you on your bike with your girls. And I cringe because we have this great setup where they're on this trailer called a Weehoo where one can pedal. And sometimes we stick them on this thing where they can hook their bike onto our bike. But then when we're on a calm road, never happened in Cambodia, they can be on their own. So it was probably not the best of places to be as an avid cycling family. And so we did have to quickly, take a detour. And now we find ourselves in the Netherlands. We're at a different school. My husband has access to work here, which is awesome. And both of our girls are cyclists. And we just actually did a tour last weekend, a little small tour. And they asked us, Mommy, why are there so many people out on the road on bikes? I mean, the amount of cyclists here is insane. I mean, it surprises us every time. We're just we're trying to teach our daughters to be independent cyclists. And we've never had so many people on the bike path with us at one time. I mean, we've been in countries where they have the state-of-the-art bike paths, but no one's there. I come from Eugene, Oregon. There's bike paths everywhere. And there's nowhere near as many people as there are here in the Netherlands on the bike path. So it's a good fit for a personal interest, right? I feel like we've made a better match to satisfy our family.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so what's next?
Yeah, what's next? I think we just need...
okay, wait, you might have a few years until the 5-year itchy feet mark comes, but in the meantime, other than small trips, I'm assuming you're going to continue doing small trips, but is there another big one in the plans?
I think that is our dream still too. We haven't talked about it. We've just had so much else on our minds recently. I think that's still our dream, to go back to do a trip like that. We both have, my husband's a woodworker, so he has no problem kind of finding jobs because everybody's in need of someone to remodel, to build, to install, to make furniture. I'm a teacher. Like I said, we can find a job anywhere. Our girls, we're trying to teach them that we, adapt to new environments. We're flexible. We saw that this summer after staying with Warm Shower host, actually. We'd stayed with a few our first time as a family and had great experiences. But our girls, once we got home to Oregon and we went over to friends for breakfast, my youngest said to me when we were at their house, Mommy, are we going to stay the night with these people tonight? And I thought, oh my gosh, she's got it. She's got that flexible, adaptable, malleable mind. So I do think that we would love to do a tour as a family, something like Alaska to Ushuaia. The only thing that we're not super excited with on that trip is the food, because we've heard kind of horror stories about access to food in Argentina. And I know it's not all about the food, but wow, the amount you eat as a family and all the gear that you take as a family. I think we need to wait until they're a little bit more independent, because right now we still carry everything, even though they can pedal bikes, but we're carrying the majority of the load. And so I think that we need to wait till they can chip in a little bit more with that in order to do a big trip where you really do need to logistically plan. But yeah, I do think that every summer we've got a bike trip in there. We did an awesome trip in Eastern Oregon this last summer. And we were mind blown by the gorgeous scenery and had warm shower hosts in the middle of nowhere. And just great experiences that we think, okay, yeah, we can do this. It's definitely an effort. It changes your definition of vacation when you travel like that. But definitely worth the effort to do that as a family. It's so much fun.
I mean, Melissa, you are such a wealth of experience. This is what I mean. Like we could there's like any number of 20 topics here we could spend more time talking about.
I know.
But I really appreciate it. It's so inspiring, your willingness to try, and that you've adapted into new phases of life and still kept your passion alive and still continue to challenge yourself to try something new. I think that it's so common in this community, because the challenge that you might face makes a lot of things in life a lot easier. And I really, really, really love hearing that you ride with your daughters now. This is so amazing. Okay, where can our listeners find more information or find your journey? So we'll put your website, of course, in the show notes. Are there any social media places that you post information where people can follow along?
Yeah, so the best now, and this is such awful timing, but I had my website alive for 10 years.
Oh,
And I
no.
finally thought, but I do the best of the website was my blog. And so it's still on Blogger, The Loong Way Home. And I can send that to you so you can put it in the show notes and just directly go to my blog. I also have a Facebook page, The Loong Way Home. I need to get better at that. But yeah, as you know, with little kids, my energy's kind of all been to being a mom, then, being a wife, being a teacher. So I've put that a little bit on the back burner. But yeah, there's definitely all the stories on my blog. My dream still, also another dream of mine, is to write a book. I already have the title. I've just, and everybody says it's in your blog. Just read, like spice up your stories, redo those, reread them, and there's your book. That's my dream. But for now, definitely on Blogger, I'll get that in for you, or Facebook, social media. I was on Instagram as well. Had albums on Flickr. Feels like a lifetime ago, but it's all still there, except for the ones you have to pay for.
Right. I was going to say, I haven't heard the words Flickr in a long time, but boy, that used to be the thing.
Yeah,
Well,
and a YouTube channel.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Thank you, Melissa. I know so many people that are going to be inspired by your story, and I can pretty much guarantee people will want to reach out and maybe have questions for you on the different ways that you've transitioned your passions. So we'll include all of that in the show notes. But thank you, Melissa. Keep us posted. We love to hear how things go along the way.
Sounds good. No, thank you, because I love how you bring the stories alive. It's fascinating listening and entertaining listening to your podcast. And I've actually recognized a lot of the guests that you have on your podcast is, I know this person.
Isn't that
I've heard of
great?
this person. It's just such a small world.
It is. It's so great. I love it. I love when those connections happen on the show too, especially Murdoch. I mean, that's just wonderful.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We will make sure that he has a copy of this show.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Melissa. And for those of you listening, if you are listening on any listening app, make sure you give us a rating and review. If you are here on YouTube, hey, make sure that you subscribe so you can catch all the episodes when they come live. And we will be back. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed making it. Wherever you are listening, please leave us a rating and a review, as it helps us reach more cyclists and hosts around the world. Visit us at Warmshowers.org to become a part of our community, or on Instagram at Warmshowers_org. If you would like to be a guest on the show or submit a question, please make sure to email us at podcast@warmshowers.org.